I'm Elizabeth Dirth and I'm the Vice Chair of the 2050 Climate Group. The 2050 Climate Group is a group of young professionals aged between 20 to 30 who are sort of working together to take action on climate change and help inspire and lead our generation in the movement towards a low-carbon Scotland. So as Vice Chair, I work to lead and manage the group. I lead on our strategy, our decision-making, our policy, our fundraising, help to sort of lead and manage the peers, and have really worked to help the group identify what they're doing, what we want to see, what our vision and mission is in really our founding and most formative years. I finished studying. I wasn't doing anything particularly related to the environment for my undergraduate degree, and spent a bit of time doing some freelance communications and writing, which is what I imagined doing when I was younger, and then was moved. At that point I was in London, moved up to Scotland, and was faced with a bit of an interesting decision, because I'd, as young graduates do, applied for a range of jobs, had a handful of interviews, etc., etc., and I was offered two different jobs on exactly the same day. And I'd had interviews at different times and the process had been different. And one was to do communications and media work for the Glasgow Commonwealth Games, and the other was to run this Green Impact project that I'd volunteered at a university up in Paisley, and run their sustainability and behaviour change projects there. And I was given a very clear fork in the road that a lot of people are not given this clearly. And at the time I was very fortunate that I was a young grad at a time when a lot of people were struggling to get their first job, and there I was offered two that I very much both wanted. And so in a lot of ways I'm very thankful that that happened. But I was able to sit and reflect about what did I want 10 years down the line, and where was the one path leading versus where was the other path leading. And I remembered thinking back to when I was a kid and thinking, I'm not a scientist and I don't have anything to contribute to this discussion. I can't help this movement progress. And here I was offered an opportunity to help move this agenda forward. And so that was obviously a clear fork in the road, and I think it's probably obvious which fork I took, that I took the job in sustainability and let the media stuff go, and have never looked back, and have never thought for a single second that that wasn't the right decision. So yeah, that was an important point for me, I think, in the process to bringing me where I am now.
Was that a decision of the head or of the heart?
I think maybe a little bit of both. I think definitely mostly driven by the heart, because that was what I felt like I should be doing, and that was what I felt like I would get the most fulfillment out of. That was definitely part of the reflection process about how I valued my work time and my life, because that's what your work time is, and what I would feel at the end of each day, and how I would feel about my accomplishments from each, and what that contributed to bigger issues across the world. But I think there was definitely a part of that my gut was telling me to go with the sustainability one. And there was a bit of recognition at that point that what I had known up until that point in the professional sphere was communications, wasn't sustainability. And there was a recognition that the first bit was going to be a bit out of my depth, because I didn't study environmental science and I didn't study sustainability and I didn't have a background in this, but I wanted to, and that want was enough, I guess. But there was a bit, the reason why I say it a little bit about my head is because at that point I was thinking back about what I wanted when I was a teenager, because I was very strong-willed and determined at that point, and I remember going up to my teachers and saying, this is what I'm going to do, and they sort of laughed at me. And some of the stuff I went up and said was like, I'm going to work for the UN one day, or I'm going to start this publication one day. And thinking back, I was able to sort of reflect on that and think one is the pathway to get to those dreams that I had when I was a kid, and the other isn't. And so that's what I mean about the head a little bit. I was able to think back about what I wanted when I was younger, and how do I get there, and can I get there?
Was that a solitary exercise that you went through, or was it more of a collective discussion that led to that decision?
I think it was mostly solitary. Yeah, I remember talking to friends or my partner about being incredibly excited about the fact that I was offered 2 jobs at a time when it was very difficult for graduates to get work. But I didn't talk to many people about how I felt about the decision-making process. I certainly didn't talk to many people about this sort of gut feeling that I had to go for the sustainability job. Partly because a lot of the people, my circles of friends or peers or etc., they wouldn't have necessarily understood. They would have thought that the media job was more exciting, and that is what I should do. I don't think any of them would have tried to outwardly influence me that way, but I think subconsciously they would have sort of thought, oh, that sounds really exciting, and then not really understood the other role. And so, as far as making the decision, it was very much my own thought process, but it had to be.
For many people, the question which they are wrestling with is how can they better align their work, their working lives, with their sense of self, their sense of mission from within them, and that process is something which they're working really hard at doing. It sounds as if what you have is almost the opposite of that, where you have a very clear alignment to the point of actually blurring the boundaries between your work and yourself.
Yes.
And the issues arising for you actually are a consequence of that.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I think I don't quite know where this perspective came from, but for a long time I've had the perspective that you spend so much of your life working, and if you're not satisfied by it, then you should do something else, because the percentage of the hours that you spend of your life in whatever your job is so high, is such a significant part of our existence, that you better like it. And I think for me, I've always had, and again, I don't know where this came from, but ever since I was a child, I've always had this sense of mission and determination and wanting to be a part of something bigger. And in many ways, there is nothing bigger than climate change, because it affects everything on the planet in some way or another. And if it is disastrous, then it's disastrous for everything and everyone. So yeah, I suppose I do struggle sometimes with the boundary between personal and professional life, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And in a lot of ways, this is what I aimed for when I was younger, when I was a kid, thinking about what I wanted when I was working and what I wanted out of that balance and aims and fulfillment, that this is what I was aiming for. So I shouldn't really complain about it, I suppose.